Before she became a symbol of international shame, Sabrina Harman was a name no one knew. She was born in Arlington, Virginia in 1978, the youngest of 5 children in a working-class family. Her father was a Vietnam War veteran turned police officer, and her mother worked as a receptionist. From a young age, Sabrina was fascinated by photography. She kept scrapbooks filled with photos of family, pets, and nature. She loved capturing quiet moments, believing photographs could tell stories better than words. By the time she graduated high school, Sabrina wasn't sure what path to take. College was expensive and she felt adrift. That's when a recruiter from the U.S. Army Reserve spoke at her school. The promise of travel, education, and structure appealed to her. In 1996, she signed up. She became part of the 372nd Military Police Company, a unit that would later be deployed to Iraq and become infamous worldwide. Those who trained with Sabrina described her as soft-spoken and reserved, not someone you'd expect to end up at the center of a global scandal. When Sabrina arrived at Abu Ghraib in 2003, the prison was in chaos. It had been used by Saddam Hussein's regime to carry out brutal executions and torture. Now it was under U.S. control, but the violence hadn't stopped. Overcrowding, understaffing, and unclear rules created a breeding ground for abuse. Soldiers were overwhelmed. Many had no training in handling detainees. The stress was relentless. Mortar attacks hit the compound regularly. Some guards started sleeping with their weapons. Others began to crack mentally. Sabrina later said, "You could feel the tension in the air, like something was about to snap." And it did. Instead of stepping back, Sabrina began taking photos, hundreds of them. Some showed mundane things, sunsets, pets, soldiers joking around, but others showed horror. She photographed a man with his hands cuffed behind his back, forced to balance on a box, wires attached to his fingers. She photographed a prisoner smeared with his own feces. She photographed a dead man, his body beaten and left to rot on ice. And in one of the most damning images, she's smiling, posing like it's a vacation snapshot. The photos weren't meant for the public. But when a fellow soldier, Joe Darby, discovered them on a shared computer and reported what he saw, the military had no choice but to investigate. In April 2004, CBS's 60 Minutes 2 aired several of the images. The world was horrified. Protest broke out in multiple countries. Radical groups used the images for recruitment. U.S. credibility on human rights was shredded overnight. President Bush addressed the nation, calling the abuses abhorrent and promising justice. But for many, it was too late. The Pentagon launched over a dozen investigations. At the center of them all stood a handful of reservists, most of them poorly trained, sleep-deprived, and operating in a system with no accountability. Sabrina Harman became the face of the scandal, not because she was the worst, but because of that smile. What did it mean? Was it joy, nervousness, indifference? Sabrina claimed she smiled to cope, to distance herself from the horror. But to millions it looked like cruelty. At her court-martial in 2005, Sabrina was charged with maltreatment of detainees, conspiracy, and dereliction of duty. Her lawyers argued that she was a scapegoat, that higher-ups encouraged the behavior or looked the other way. Evidence showed that military intelligence officers gave ambiguous orders. Some even encouraged rough treatment to soften up prisoners. But the jury saw the photos. They heard witnesses say Sabrina laughed during abuse. They read her emails where she wrote, "This is the stuff they don't show you on the news." It was impossible to explain away. She was convicted and sentenced to 6 months in military prison, a surprisingly light punishment given the global impact. But for the victims, the damage couldn't be undone. One detainee, whose name remains classified, lost his ability to walk due to spinal damage. Another suffered permanent hearing loss. Many were never even charged with crimes. They were simply swept up in raids. Their pain became background noise to a war spinning out of control. After serving her sentence, Sabrina disappeared from the public eye. She changed her last name, avoided interviews. Some believe she lives a quiet life in the Midwest. Others say she moved abroad. No one knows for sure. Her legacy, however, is permanent. Her photo appears in college textbooks under chapters about ethics. She's the subject of documentaries and military case studies. Her smile, a moment frozen in time, became one of the most infamous images of 21st century warfare. And it forces a question. What does it take for an ordinary person to participate in extraordinary evil? Sabrina wasn't a monster. She wasn't a sadist. She was a small-town girl with a camera, caught in a system that encouraged silence and rewarded conformity. But her silence, her smile, spoke volumes. Abu Ghraib wasn't just a prison, it was a mirror. And what we saw reflected back was chilling. And just when you think it couldn't get any darker, it does. Because the next woman on our list didn't just witness horror. She betrayed national secrets from the cockpit of a nuclear bomber. The psychological impact on Sabrina was never fully known, but fellow soldiers later spoke about her demeanor during the deployment. One said, she was the quiet one, always watching, always documenting. It was like she didn't know where she stood, observer or participant. Others recalled moments where she seemed conflicted, pausing before taking certain photos as if trying to process the ethics in real time. Military psychologists reviewing the Abu Ghraib case noted something disturbing. Many of the soldiers involved weren't hardened killers. They were average reservists thrown into an ethical vacuum. In such an environment, groupthink, obedience, and emotional detachment flourished. A declassified military report, the Fay Report, found that Sabrina's unit lacked proper training, oversight, and discipline. It concluded that the abuses were not the result of a few rogue individuals, but of a broader failure of command. Yet few higher-ups were punished. The system, it seemed, sacrificed its lower ranks to save face. Harman became a scapegoat, but not an innocent one. Her court statements were brief. She expressed regret but never delivered a full public apology. Some believed she was advised to remain quiet, fearing legal repercussions. Others saw it as a refusal to take responsibility. In her few post-trial letters to friends, Sabrina hinted at disillusionment. She wrote, "We weren't prepared for what we saw. No one told us what to do. We figured it out as we went, and we got it wrong." The families of the detainees never received formal apologies. Some victims fled Iraq and rebuilt their lives in silence. Others died in obscurity. But their faces live on, etched in the same photos that made Sabrina infamous. In time, Hollywood would flirt with dramatizing Abu Ghraib, but studios pulled back, fearing backlash. No movie was ever made about Harman. Only analysis, only study, only shame. Today, Sabrina's name doesn't trend. She's not the subject of daily headlines, but she is taught in ethics courses, in military academies, in lectures about how power corrupts. Her smile, innocent on its surface, became a grotesque symbol of systemic failure. And it asks us to consider, what would we have done in her place? Would we have refused? Would we have reported it sooner? Or would we, like her, just smiled and kept the camera rolling? That's why her story matters. Not because she was uniquely evil, but because she wasn't. Because she could have been anyone, a neighbor, a classmate, a friend. And it's that realization that ordinary people can carry out extraordinary cruelty that makes her case more terrifying than any horror movie. Her smile will never be forgotten, and it shouldn't be. But just when you think the damage caused by a single smile is the worst it can get, think again. Because the next woman didn't just abuse prisoners, She broke the chain of trust at 30,000 feet. From the deserts of Iraq, we climb into the cockpit of a nuclear bomber, where betrayal comes with an afterburner. Kelly Flynn grew up in a middle-class family in the small town of St. Louis, Missouri. She was ambitious, book-smart, and carried herself with a quiet confidence. Her mother was a school teacher and her father a dentist. There were no military roots in the family, but from an early age, Kelly dreamt of flight. She would stare at jets overhead and tell her classmates, "Someday I'll be flying one of those." She wasn't just chasing a dream, she was building toward it. Kelly graduated at the top of her high school class, earned a spot at the U.S. Air Force Academy, and became one of the most promising cadets of her year. Her discipline was unmatched, and she had the rare combination of intelligence, poise, and technical skill. It wasn't long before she became the first woman ever selected to pilot the legendary B-52 bomber, a machine synonymous with America's nuclear might. To many, she was a symbol of equality and progress in uniform, a new chapter for the U.S. military. But beneath the surface, pressure was mounting. Kelly wasn't just a pilot, she was a political figure, a public face, and every move she made was being watched. The fall began quietly, with a relationship. In 1996, stationed at Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota, Kelly Flynn began a romantic affair with a civilian man. The issue? He was married to another officer's wife. That alone was enough to spark rumors, but it didn't stop there. Soon after, Flynn began another relationship, this time with an enlisted man, a direct violation of the Air Force's fraternization rules. Flynn's commanding officers ordered her to end the relationships. She promised she would, but she didn't. Instead, she lied multiple times about ending the affairs. When questioned under oath, she denied the ongoing contact. Her commanding officer saw this not as a lapse in judgment, but as a fundamental breach of military law. Charges came quickly: adultery, disobeying a lawful order, conduct unbecoming of an officer, and making false statements. What might have been handled quietly exploded into national headlines. By spring 1997, Kelly Flynn had become a media firestorm. She was on the cover of Newsweek. Talk shows debated her morality. Political commentators clashed over whether the military's moral code was outdated or essential. To some, she was a scapegoat, punished for living her life. To others, she had betrayed the sacred trust placed in anyone flying a nuclear-capable aircraft. And that trust was the issue. Pilots like Flynn are entrusted with launch codes, security clearances, and decisions that could end civilizations. Integrity isn't optional, it's mandatory. During court proceedings, military prosecutors pointed out that it wasn't just the adultery or fraternization, it was the lies. "We gave her the keys to the most dangerous machine on Earth," one colonel said, "and she lied to our faces." Faced with a court-martial, Kelly resigned. The Air Force accepted her resignation in lieu of prosecution, and she was discharged from service in May 1997. Her wings were clipped for good. The fallout was brutal. Flynn lost her dream career. Her public image was in tatters. She was labeled a disgrace by some and a feminist martyr by others. In interviews, she remained composed but defiant. "I was punished for being a woman," she said. "If I were a man, this wouldn't have made national news." In 1999, she published a memoir titled "Proud to Be My Life, the Air Force, the Controversy." In it, she detailed her struggles with loneliness, the intense scrutiny she faced, and the emotional toll of her sudden fame. But critics argued that she deflected blame, that she never fully owned the weight of her decisions. Years later, military insiders revealed that her security clearance was under review long before the scandal broke. Her superiors worried about her judgment. Some claimed they saw the unraveling coming but were powerless to intervene. And yet her story became a case study in leadership programs, a cautionary tale about ethics, image, and the crushing weight of military expectations. What makes Kelly Flynn's story so compelling and disturbing isn't just the scandal, it's the setting. This wasn't a nightclub or a college dorm, it was a nuclear base, and she wasn't a teenager. She was a B-52 pilot with the power to carry thermonuclear warheads across continents. In an era defined by strategic deterrence and precision, she became a symbol of emotional recklessness. But she was also human, and that's what makes her case so divisive. Was she destroyed by a double standard, or did she destroy her own legacy through selfishness? Either way, Kelly Flynn became the first and last woman to ever pilot a B-52 before being forced to resign in disgrace. And if you thought lies and scandal were shocking at 30,000 feet, just wait. Because the next story takes us from betrayal in the sky to treason on the ground. Long before she sat in the cockpit of a B-52 bomber, Kelly Flynn stood out. At the Air Force Academy, she was one of just a handful of women in her engineering track. Her classmates described her as intense, laser-focused, and not easily shaken. She was the one who stayed after hours in the flight simulator, always perfecting, always pushing, one former cadet recalled. She graduated in the top quarter of her class and earned the rare opportunity to fly one of the most powerful and complex aircraft in the world. The B-52 wasn't just a plane, it was a symbol of American dominance. To pilot it required not just technical skill, but ironclad integrity. After all, these were the aircraft carrying nuclear weapons. Kelly quickly became a poster child for military progress. She was profiled in Air Force publications. Newspapers ran stories about the first female B-52 pilot. She gave motivational talks to high schoolers and appeared in base media campaigns. She wore her uniform with pride, and the military proudly wore her image, until it all collapsed. What triggered her downfall wasn't just misconduct, it was a perfect storm of rule-breaking, deception, and pride. When news of her relationships broke, many hoped it could be quietly resolved. But Kelly pushed back. She refused to accept a simple reprimand. She claimed her personal life was none of the military's business. Her resistance transformed a disciplinary matter into a public war. At the heart of the controversy was a lie. She told investigators she had ended her affair with a civilian husband of another officer. But she hadn't. She continued seeing him and denied it under oath. In the military, that's not just a mistake, it's a crime. And this wasn't just any officer. Kelly had access to nuclear codes, secure air bases, and flight plans. To the Pentagon, her personal conduct became a national security issue. If she could lie about her love life, what else could she lie about? The trust between commander and pilot was broken. As media coverage exploded, public opinion split down the middle. To her supporters, she was a victim of outdated rules, a woman punished for doing what countless male officers had done in secret. Editorials in major newspapers questioned the military's priorities. Is adultery really worse than incompetence? Is lying about an affair worse than crashing a plane? One columnist asked. To her critics, she had shattered the core value of honor. "We give these pilots the ultimate power," one Air Force colonel said. "And if we can't trust them to tell the truth, we can't trust them at all." Congress held hearings. Senators argued over whether military morality rules should evolve. Feminist leaders spoke out. Kelly, meanwhile, became the eye of the storm. In press conferences, she appeared poised, but behind the scenes, she was unraveling. Eventually, the Air Force gave her an ultimatum: resign quietly or face court-martial and possible jail time. She chose resignation. She was honorably discharged in May 1997, a move that infuriated some critics who wanted harsher punishment. But by then, the damage had been done. Her career was over. The Air Force had lost its rising star, and the public had watched a fall from grace in real time. In the years that followed, Kelly tried to rebuild. She gave interviews, joined speaking tours, and authored a memoir titled Proud to Be. In it, she claimed she was scapegoated for being a woman in a man's world. She spoke of loneliness, isolation, and feeling like a pawn in a larger game. Still, critics argued she deflected responsibility, that her book downplayed the seriousness of her actions. One reviewer wrote, "Flynn sees herself as a victim, but never confronts the truth of her betrayal." Decades later, her case is still studied in military ethics programs. It's not just about sex, it's about integrity, about the line between personal freedom and professional duty, about what happens when ego collides with protocol. She didn't crash a plane, she didn't leak secrets, but she broke trust. And in a nuclear chain of command, that's enough to shake foundations. Kelly Flynn's story is a warning that one lie, just one, can unravel even the most promising career. And speaking of unraveling, the next case isn't just about betrayal, it's about espionage. A young army clerk manipulated by foreign agents who quietly leaked NATO's secrets for months. You've heard about betrayal in the sky. Now get ready for treason on the ground. You might think the story ends there, with lies in the sky and shattered reputations on the runway. But it's only getting started, because the final woman on our list didn't just make headlines. She handed enemy agents the keys to NATO's war plans, one envelope at a time. And the scariest part, she never even fired a weapon. Kelly Therese Warren was just 21 years old when she enlisted in the U.S. Army. Raised in a working-class neighborhood in upstate New York, she was known as studious, polite, and almost invisible in social settings. Her teachers described her as sharp but distant. She didn't cause problems, and she rarely spoke unless spoken to. After basic training, she was assigned to an intelligence support role at a U.S. base in West Germany. The Cold War was nearing its end, but tensions were still real. Every NATO troop movement, every missile deployment, every scrap of intel had the potential to tip the scales of global politics. Kelly didn't carry a rifle, but she carried access. Her job included typing up briefings, filing classified documents, and maintaining secure communication logs. No one thought twice about her. That's what made her dangerous. In late 1988, Kelly met a man at a Frankfurt cafe. His name was Gabor. He said he was a translator, charming, older, worldly. They struck up a conversation about language, art, and American music. It seemed innocent. But Gabor wasn't a translator. He was an officer for the Hungarian Secret Service. Within weeks, the relationship became intimate. Kelly thought she was in love. What she didn't realize at first was that every moment they shared was being monitored, recorded, and used. Soon Gabor made a request. "Just grab one training schedule," he said. "It's not important." Then came a radio frequency list, then a base map. It escalated quickly. She was trained to say no, but love, fear, and manipulation overwhelmed protocol. By 1989, she was passing on high-value information, deployment rosters, missile sites, encrypted briefings. She left documents in mailboxes, dropped envelopes in parks, even carried data on floppy disks in her boot heels. Every exchange felt riskier, but also more thrilling. She believed she was helping someone she loved. The breach was enormous. By early 1990, NATO analysts noticed patterns in Eastern Bloc maneuvers. They were adjusting tactics in ways that suggested inside knowledge. Counterintelligence traced inconsistencies back to Kelly's clerical access. A sting was launched. Kelly was shadowed. A surveillance team caught her leaving the base in civilian clothes and placing a padded envelope behind a dumpster. Inside, troop training protocols complete with encryption keys. She was arrested the next day, her apartment raided, her belongings seized. Investigators found love letters from Gabor, most written in Hungarian, photos of him, and a torn map with hand-drawn markings. The worst discovery? A list of over 30 document IDs she had accessed that had nothing to do with her job. The military moved quickly. She was flown back to the US and held in a secure facility in Texas. Her court-martial was classified. Only select press were allowed limited access to transcripts. But what they heard shocked the nation. In her defense, Kelly said she never believed it would matter. "I just thought if I gave him what he asked for, he'd stay. I didn't think people would die." But prosecutors painted a different picture. She handed over NATO's deployment plans. "In a war, those documents get people killed," one colonel said. She pleaded guilty to espionage, conspiracy, and conduct prejudicial to good order. The sentence: 25 years in federal prison. She served 18 before being quietly released. Her story never became a Hollywood thriller. No dramatic shootouts, no exotic disguises. Just a young woman, alone in Germany, seduced and manipulated, until she became the single greatest internal threat to US troop safety in the European theater. Her betrayal forced NATO to rotate entire brigades, reset encryption protocols, and suspend certain joint missions. It cost millions. It broke alliances. And it all started with a coffee date and a smile. Kelly Therese Warren vanished after her release. No memoirs, no interviews, no apology, just silence. Her name remains a quiet stain in military archives, not a traitor in the headlines, but a reminder that trust can be shattered from the inside. She never pulled a trigger, but her betrayal had consequences that rippled far beyond any battlefield. And that, perhaps, is the most terrifying kind of enemy, the one who never looks like one at all. Kelly Therese Warren may have worn a uniform, but she never fit the image of a hardened spy. She was soft-spoken, introverted, and meticulous, traits that made her invaluable as a military clerk. Her supervisors noted her flawless attention to detail, her punctuality, and her ability to remain calm under pressure. But those same traits also made her a perfect target. Born in Albany, New York, Kelly had few close friends. She struggled with anxiety and often withdrew into books and journaling. She wrote poetry and dreamed of becoming a teacher. But with few financial options after high school, she enlisted in the Army to earn money for college. That decision would change the course of her life and nearly compromise an entire military alliance. Stationed in West Germany during the final years of the Cold War, Kelly had no battlefield responsibilities. She wasn't carrying a rifle. She wasn't flying aircraft. But her role gave her proximity to critical information: rotations, personnel records, encrypted messages, and mission logs. Documents passed through her hands daily, and no one ever suspected her of anything. That changed when she met Gabor. The relationship began innocently. Gabor was charming, older, and worldly. He spoke about art and culture, music and travel. To a 21-year-old homesick clerk, he seemed like a dream. What Kelly didn't know was that Gabor worked for the Hungarian Secret Service, part of the Warsaw Pact intelligence network. He used classic tradecraft: slow seduction, small requests, emotional manipulation. At first, he asked for minor details: timing of supply shipments, locations of field drills. Harmless, he claimed, just things everyone already knows. But the stakes escalated. Soon, Kelly was asked to provide encryption schedules, unit assignments, and travel manifests for officers. She was told it would keep the peace, that it would avoid unnecessary confrontations. And she believed it, at least at first. She left envelopes in trash bins, dropped microfilm under benches, wrote notes in lemon juice, and used heat to reveal them. She was living a double life, working for the Army by day, leaking secrets by night. She started getting paid. small amounts usually wired through shadow accounts. But it wasn't about money. It was about feeling needed. For the first time in her life, Kelly felt important. And it blinded her to the danger. The damage was catastrophic. American counterintelligence flagged unusual activity in Warsaw Pact troop movements. Someone was tipping them off. After weeks of tracing access logs and monitoring unusual file requests, suspicion narrowed to Kelly. She was caught during a drop, an envelope with 2 flash drives hidden inside a hollowed-out paperback book. Her arrest sent shockwaves through NATO. At her trial, the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence: timestamps, surveillance photos, wire transfers, and classified document access logs. Her defense painted her as naive, a lonely young woman manipulated by professionals. The judge didn't buy it. "You had access. You had a choice. You knew the risks," he said. She was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. But the most haunting part? The number of soldiers whose identities were exposed through her leaks. Intelligence estimates suggest over 200 personnel were compromised. Names, ranks, assignments. One officer was pulled from active duty in Turkey due to credible threats. Entire operations were delayed. NATO scrambled to rotate forces and re-encrypt their systems, and Kelly served 18 years before being released under a plea arrangement. She vanished from the public eye. Her name, erased from Army directories, lingers only in classified briefings and obscure Cold War studies. But her betrayal still matters, because it wasn't violent, it wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, emotional, and devastating. And that makes it all the more dangerous. And these 3 stories share more than just uniforms. They share betrayal. Sabrina Harman stood above tortured prisoners and smiled. Kelly Flynn flew nuclear weapons while lying under oath. Kelly Warren handed NATO secrets to the enemy for love. None of them fired a shot. But all of them did damage that rippled through history, cost lives, and shattered trust. What do these cases teach us? That the enemy isn't always across the border. Sometimes she's in your unit. Sometimes she smiles in your group photo. Sometimes she's the one you trusted with your life. They remind us that uniforms don't guarantee loyalty, that rank doesn't equal integrity, and that the people we empower can and do sometimes use that power to harm. These aren't just scandals, they're warning signs. Which case shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that dig beneath the surface, where truth is often darker than fiction.